The Cherokee Treaty of 1777 started in motion the migration that would culminate in 1779. Boone would head back to Kentucky. Robertson, along with numerous others, began plans to move. But first, two things needed to happen.
By the winter of 1778, British Governor Henry Hamilton believed he could strangle the American West, sweeping down the Ohio, rallying native allies, and crushing Kentucky and the Holston settlements in one great arc of destruction.
But George Rogers Clark struck first.
In February of 1779, through frozen rivers and night marches, Clark captured Vincennes, and with it, Hamilton himself. The British command of the Northwest collapsed in a single surprise blow. Yet even as Hamilton surrendered, another campaign was already moving south.
This campaign meant to break the Chickamauga Cherokees. Dragging canoes war towns along the Tennessee River near modern-day Chattanooga, who had become the British spear point against the frontier.
Robertson had suggested the campaign to North Carolina Governor Caswell in his resignation letter, and Governor Patrick Henry ordered Colonel Evan Shelby into motion. Volunteers poured in. No draft was needed. 500 volunteers. Men from Watauga and the Nolichucky took up rifles without pay. On April 1st, their rendezvous formed at Long Island and the mouth of Big Creek, at Robertson's home and fort, where boats were built from felled poplar trees, flatboats, pirogues, long canoes.
In early April of 1779, the flotilla pushed down the swollen Tennessee River. At dawn, they struck. Guided through flooded cane brakes, the militia waded into Chickamauga itself, a town nearly a mile long. Chiefs dragging canoe and Big Fool fled as the militia surged in. Houses burned, corn cribs were emptied.
Town after town fell. Chickamauga, Running Water, Long Island Town, Crow Town. Horses taken by the hundreds. Mounts that would carry the militia home. The Chickamauga war machine was shattered in a matter of days, and word soon spread that the two hammer blows, Clark's capture of Hamilton in the west and Shelby's destruction of the river towns, had broken British power in the west. The frontier, at last, exhaled.
For the first time in years, the raids slowed, the war smoke lifted, and in that fragile calm, James Robertson moved. From his home on Big Creek, preparations quietly began. Small parties formed, supplies gathered. Before a colony could move, the land itself had to be claimed.
That spring of 1779, Robertson set out with 9 men, cutting westward toward the Cumberland. They reached the bluffs. They planted corn, raised rough cabins to mark possession. Near what would one day become the crossroads of 23rd and Park, the first proof of settlement took root. The Cumberland was no longer rumor. It was home in waiting. But Robertson needed one thing more.
Just down the river from the bluffs, where French traders still drifted in from the Ohio, he purchased a small skiff for a single guinea. Robertson and a few others boarded the skiff and headed downstream, 200 miles down the Cumberland, down the Ohio, then to the Mississippi, until he reached the Illinois country where Clark now stood victorious.
There, Robertson discussed Clark's cabin rights at French Lick. An understanding was reached. On his return, the wilderness nearly claimed him. When he reached an Indian village, he was accused of spying and marked for death, spared only when French traders convinced his captors he sought horses, not secrets. Tension softened into uneasy friendship. Before leaving, Robertson purchased fine Spanish breeding mares, prizes of the frontier, and once more traversed 500 miles through wilderness towards home. He left the horses with a Kentucky settlement. They would be reclaimed when the settlers passed back through.
Back on the Holston, the final preparations were underway. While Robertson tested the land, John Donaldson prepared the river. He consulted Colonel Evan Shelby about the French Lick, its dangers, its history, its value. Then he committed everything. With his wife and 11 members of his household, Donaldson began building boats at Long Island, with the dream of rebuilding his lost fortune.
There rose a vessel unlike any the frontier had seen. They called her Adventure, a 100-foot flatboat, armed with cannon, built to lead 30 settlers through hostile country. Some 30 other vessels were built. Over 200 souls would travel 1,000 miles along the rivers. Robertson knew the small flotilla filled with his wife, children, sister, and brothers might be safer after the attack on Dragging Canoe, aligned along the river near modern-day Chattanooga. He now wrote his resignation letter to Governor Caswell, forfeiting his role as Indian agent.
James Robertson, January 14, 1779, to Governor Caswell of North Carolina. I now beg leave to tell you that from many disadvantages to me with respect to my private property and the necessary business that now compels me to other distant parts, it is not in my power to perform the trust reposed in me, and I humbly resign that trust.
The plan was set. Robertson and the overland party would depart in late summer. Donaldson and the river flotilla would follow when winter waters rose. 2 paths, 1 destination, the Cumberland. Hopes and dreams awaited, along with tragedy.